"You will die if you go inside," yelled the obese maid to the Mafia boss. And then this happened. Midnight, a sealed chapel, a red laser skims the door and the boss starts bleeding. He refuses a hospital and drags in an ER nurse at gunpoint. Her heirloom locket matches the strange metal on the door. That's not luck. That's a key. Suddenly, another blast. Phones cut. Cameras go dark for 3 minutes. Someone inside this house wants the boss dead. The maid swears the trap is new. The nurse finds a hidden lens in her own bag. A traitor is watching. Behind that door waits a ledger tied to the nurse's missing mother and a choice that could burn the city or save it. By dawn, a rival demands the nurse and the ledger at an abandoned rail yard. If the nurse is the key and the boss is the shield, who set the trap? What secret is her mother guarding, and which one of them won't make it out alive? The midnight air hung thick with tension as Bruna's warning echoed through the palazzo's stone corridors. "You will die if you go inside!" Her heavy footsteps thundered across the marble floor as she rushed toward Casimir, her weathered face creased with genuine fear. Casimir's hand had already brushed the chapel door when the pressure sensor activated. The laser's red line sliced across his wrist, quick and deadly as a viper's strike. Blood welled immediately, dark against his pale skin. "Everyone back," he ordered, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute authority. His security detail retreated instantly, weapons drawn and scanning for threats. In the controlled chaos that followed, Bruna wrung her hands, her bulk shifting anxiously. "We need a doctor," she insisted, but Casimir's sharp headshake cut her off. "No hospitals." His gaze swept the courtyard. "Find me an alternative." Minutes later, his men dragged in Ivy Laurent, still in her scrubs from her hospital shift. Her honey-brown hair had escaped its practical bun, and exhaustion lined her face. The guards' weapons trained on her as they marched her to Casimir's study. The study was a testament to old-world luxury, leather-bound books, heavy wooden furniture, and a massive desk that dominated the space. Ivy's hands remained steady as she examined the wound, though fury sparked in her eyes. "This needs stitches," she stated flatly, reaching for the medical supplies his men had gathered. "And you're an idiot for refusing proper medical care." Casimir's eyebrows rose slightly at her boldness. "Watch your tongue, nurse." "Or what? You'll shoot me for giving medical advice?" She cleaned the wound with efficient movements. "The truth is the truth, regardless of how many guns you have." Bruna hovered nearby, her constant pacing drawing Casimir's attention. The old housekeeper's eyes kept darting to the chapel door, visible through the study's window. "It wasn't like this before," she muttered. "The chapel was safe. Always safe until now." As Ivy worked, she caught glimpses of her locket's reflection in the polished surface of Casimir's desk. The delicate filigree pattern matched exactly the ornate ironwork on the chapel door, a detail she carefully kept from her expression as she tied off the last stitch. When she finished, Casimir extended an envelope thick with cash. "For your trouble." Ivy stepped back, wiping her hands on a cloth. "I don't want your money. I want to leave." "That won't be possible just yet." Casimir's tone was silk over steel. "The palazzo is now under lockdown. Bruna will show you to a guest room." The palazzo revealed itself as Bruna led Ivy through its maze of corridors. The central courtyard formed the heart of the building, with the chapel occupying its own wing. Security cameras covered most angles, but Ivy's analytical mind noted the blind spots, particularly the shadows beneath the loggia and the recessed doorways of the east wing. Her assigned room was elegant but clearly a cage, with its ornate furniture and subtle security measures. Bruna provided basic necessities and, surprisingly, allowed Ivy to keep her small medical kit with its scissors and scalpel. "Sleep if you can, child," Bruna advised, her bulk filling the doorway. "Things are not right here. Not right at all." She glanced over her shoulder before adding in a whisper. "The chapel has never been trapped before. Someone's changed the rules." After Bruna left, Ivy paced the confines of her room. She tucked the knife from her medical kit under her pillow, a small comfort against the armed men outside her door. Through her window, she could see Casimir standing alone in the courtyard, his tall figure motionless as he stared at the chapel door. The first drops of rain began to fall, dotting the cobblestones around him. In the kitchen below, Bruna stress-baked, her hands kneading dough as she muttered prayers under her breath. The security team moved through the palazzo like shadows, searching for signs of who might have armed the chapel's entrance. The building hummed with quiet tension, like a bowstring drawn tight and waiting for release. Ivy sat on the edge of her bed, fingers absently tracing the pattern on her locket. the pattern that matched the chapel door with unsettling precision. Outside, the rain fell harder, but Casimir remained in the courtyard, seemingly oblivious to the weather as he contemplated the chapel that had nearly killed him. The palazzo's ancient walls held countless secrets, but tonight they had acquired fresh ones. A trapped chapel, a captured nurse, an heirloom locket with suspicious similarities to centuries-old ironwork, and a mafia boss whose blood had already been drawn by whatever game was now in play. As the clock approached 2 a.m., the storm intensified, lightning occasionally illuminating the courtyard where Casimir maintained his vigil. In her room, Ivy finally lay down, one hand beneath her pillow on the knife's handle, her mind racing with questions about the chapel, her locket, and the strange circumstances that had brought her here. The night pressed on, heavy with the weight of unspoken threats and hidden dangers. Through it all, the chapel stood silent, its newly armed entrance a mystery that had already drawn first blood. The rain continued to fall, washing away all traces of the evening's events except for the memories held within the palazzo's walls and the minds of those who now found themselves caught in whatever deadly game had begun. Ivy lay in the unfamiliar bed, her mind racing despite her exhaustion. The sheets were silk, the mattress cloud-soft, but sleep refused to come. Bruna's earlier panic echoed in her thoughts, the way the housekeeper's hands had trembled, how her voice had cracked with genuine fear. Why hadn't Casimir left when the trap was discovered? A man with his resources could have vanished to any safe house in Rome. Instead, he stayed, pacing the courtyard like a caged lion. Her phone's screen glowed in the darkness. 3:47 a.m. No signal bars. She tried refreshing, but nothing changed. Of course, places like this would have signal jammers for emergencies. The corridor's wooden floors creaked outside her door. Ivy slipped from bed, pressing her ear against the wood. Soft footsteps and the gentle clink of china approached. She eased the door open to find Bruna balancing a tea tray. "You should be sleeping," Bruna whispered, but her expression softened. "Come, help an old woman with this tray." Inside the room, Bruna's hands shook as she poured 2 cups. "The chapel wasn't always dangerous," she murmured, glancing at the door. "The explosives, they're new. In the hinges, someone did this recently. Someone who knows the palazzo." Ivy's fingers tightened around her teacup. "How recently?" "Days, maybe a week." Bruna's voice dropped lower. "Someone with access, someone trusted." The tea grew cold as Ivy processed this. After Bruna left, she paced until her medical training overrode her caution. That cut needed a proper examination. She found 2 guards outside her door. "I need to check his wound," she announced with professional authority. They exchanged looks but escorted her to Casimir's study. He sat at his desk, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up. The wound was angry red against his pale skin. "You need a scan," she stated flatly. "There could be microshrapnel." Casimir's laugh was low and without humor. "You're persistent? And you're reckless? Let me check it properly." He gestured to the desk lamp, swiveling it closer. Under the bright light, Ivy examined his wrist. Her fingers traced the skin around the cut, noting something odd. For a man whose reputation suggested frequent violence, there was remarkably little scar tissue. As she cleaned the wound again, something caught Casimir's attention. Her locket had slipped free of her scrubs, swinging in the lamplight. His expression shifted for a fraction of a second before smoothing over. "That's an unusual piece," he said. Casually. Too casually. "Family heirloom? From my mother." Ivy focused on her work, not meeting his eyes. "Valeria. She disappeared when I was young." His fingers twitched slightly at the name. "Disappeared?" "Yes, I was 7. She secured fresh gauze over the cut. "No one ever found her." The study door opened as Bruna entered with a covered tray. The smell of homemade soup filled the room. "I didn't ask for food," Ivy protested. "You need to eat," Casimir stated. "I'm not hungry." Her stomach chose that moment to growl loudly, betraying her. A smirk touched Casimir's lips as he nodded to Bruna, who set the tray down with a knowing look. The soup was perfect. Rich broth, tiny pasta, fresh herbs. Ivy tried to eat slowly, maintaining dignity as exhaustion and hunger warred within her. Through the study's windows, the courtyard began to wake. Guards changed shifts as the sky lightened to pearl gray. It was 5:30 a.m. when Ivy found herself on a second-floor balcony, watching men in specialized gear arrive. Their equipment spoke of explosive expertise. A tall man in an impeccable suit approached Casimir below. Even from above, Ivy could sense his careful deference. Enzo Vieri, she would later learn, the consigliere whose polished manner masked something cold. "Audit the access logs," Casimir ordered, his voice carrying in the morning quiet. "Everyone with inner circle clearance, times, dates, surveillance footage." "Of course," Enzo replied smoothly. "And the nurse?" Casimir looked up, meeting Ivy's eyes on the balcony. "Once the chapel is secured, she'll be escorted to the gate." Behind Ivy, something clattered. Bruna had dropped her cleaning cloth. The housekeeper's face had gone pale as she stared at Casimir, a flash of fear crossing her features before she hurried away. The sun crept higher, painting the palazzo's walls in soft gold. Bomb technicians assembled their equipment with practiced efficiency. Guards patrolled with increased vigilance. And through it all, Ivy couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something vital. Something in the way Casimir had looked at her locket, in Bruna's reaction to her promised release, in the very air of this place that hummed with unspoken dangers. The morning light revealed the chapel's beauty. Aged stone and intricate ironwork that had witnessed centuries of secrets. The same pattern from her locket wrapped around its door, a coincidence too precise to be accident. Below, Enzo made notes in a leather portfolio, while Casimir issued quiet orders to his security team. Ivy touched her locket, wondering what her mother would make of this strange morning, wondering if somehow, after all these years, she'd stumbled into answers she never knew she was looking for. The breakfast hour approached, bringing with it the palazzo's daily rhythms. Staff moved purposefully through the courtyard, maintaining normalcy despite the armed guards and bomb squad. Ivy watched it all, cataloging details, remembering paths, noting which windows offered the clearest views of the chapel's entrance. Knowledge was power, after all, and something told her she'd need every advantage she could get. The morning sun baked the courtyard as Ivy stood with Bruna on the loggia, watching technicians in bulky bomb suits approach the chapel. Their movements were deliberate, each step measured against hidden threats. "They know what they're doing," Bruna muttered, more to herself than Ivy, her hands worried at her apron, twisting the fabric. The bomb squad's leader gestured with hand signals, directing his team into position. The morning light caught on their protective visors, creating brief flashes of brilliance. The explosion came from nowhere, not from the chapel, but from the far courtyard wall. The security niche erupted in a spray of ancient stone and mortar. The blast wave rattled windows and sent pigeons scattering into the sky. A guard crumpled, clutching his head as blood trickled between his fingers. "Get down!" Strong hands yanked Ivy backward as a second wave of debris rained onto the loggia. Casimir's body curved over hers, shielding her from falling masonry. His cologne mixed with gunpowder and dust. Shouts echoed across the courtyard. Men with weapons drawn converged on the blast site, securing the perimeter with practiced efficiency. Medical teams rushed to the injured guard. "Sir!" Bruna's voice shook. "I should have said more. I found fresh putty around the chapel lock yesterday afternoon. That's why I warned you. Someone had been there recently." Casimir's jaw tightened. His hand remained on Ivy's arm, grip firm but not painful. "Show me." Before they could move, Enzo appeared, his perfect suit now dusted with debris. "The access logs," he said quietly. A dummy credential was used at 2:12 this morning. 3-minute window, all courtyard cameras disabled. "Only senior staff can generate those," Casimir replied, voice deadly soft. "Precisely." Casimir's orders came rapid fire. Gates were chained. Guards collected phones. Ivy watched hers disappear into a sealed pouch. Signal jammers hummed to life at full strength, creating an electronic dome over the palazzo. "Everyone stays in assigned areas," Casimir commanded. "No exceptions." They moved through the palazzo's hidden arteries. Narrow corridors behind paneled walls, service stairs that bypassed the main routes. Ivy memorized each turn, noting how the panic paths connected major sections of the house. The infirmary was a surprise. A fully equipped medical suite hidden behind what looked like a storage room. The injured guard lay on an examination table, blood matting his hair. "Probable concussion," Ivy diagnosed, checking his pupils. The blast wave. "This is why you need to leave," Casimir interrupted. "Then let me go," Ivy snapped, cleaning the guard's head wound with more force than necessary. "You're the one keeping me here." "Because there will be a third blast." His voice was ice. "The chapel trap failed. This explosion failed. Our snake is getting desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. So we wait. While using me as bait, while keeping you alive." His eyes met hers. "The moment you leave these walls, you're vulnerable. Think, Ivy. Why plant that second charge? To force movement, create chaos. Our enemy wants us running, scattered, exposed. She couldn't argue with his logic, but that didn't mean she had to like it. The guard's wound needed stitches. She focused on her work, letting the familiar motions calm her racing thoughts. The early afternoon sun slanted through high windows as Ivy finally headed back to her room. 2 guards flanked her, their vigilance heightened after the morning's events. The corridor was quiet except for their footsteps on marble. A flash of red caught her eye, a pinprick of light sweeping across her wall. Her medical training recognized it instantly, the signature of a scoped rifle. "Down!" a guard shouted as Ivy dropped. Her heart hammered against the floor, breath coming in sharp gasps as adrenaline flooded her system. The red dot vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only the thunder of her pulse in her ears. The guards moved with practiced speed, one covering her body while the other scanned windows and rooflines. Through the roar of blood in her ears, Ivy heard boots running, shouts echoing across the courtyard, but all she could focus on was her own ragged breathing and the cold certainty that someone had just tried to kill her. "Move her! Now!" More guards arrived, creating a human shield as they hustled her away from the exposed corridor. Her legs shook as they guided her through another hidden passage, this one descending into the palazzo's depths. Emergency lights cast everything in red shadow. The air grew cooler, heavy with age and secrets. Their footsteps echoed off stone that had stood for centuries. "Secondary safe room," someone muttered. "Level 3 protocols." Metal doors swung open, revealing a fortified chamber equipped with monitors, communications gear, and what looked like enough supplies for a siege. The modern technology contrasted sharply with the ancient walls. Ivy's nursing instincts kicked in, helping her manage the adrenaline crash. Deep breaths, count to 4, focus on the physical, the cool air, the solid floor beneath her feet, the steady beep of monitoring equipment. But her hands wouldn't stop shaking, and her mind kept replaying that red dot's lazy sweep across her wall. Someone had her in their crosshairs. Someone wanted her dead. Or perhaps a quiet voice whispered in her mind. They just wanted her to think she was the target. In this game of smoke and mirrors, even assassination attempts might be misdirection. The safe room's door sealed with a pneumatic hiss, locking them into their underground fortress. On the monitors, she watched guards sweep the rooflines, searching for a shooter who had likely vanished the moment their shot was revealed. Gunfire never came, but the thunder of boots filled the service stair as Casimir's radio crackled to life. "Movement at the convent," a spotter reported. "Northwest corner, 3rd floor, metal reflection." Ivy's heart pounded as they raced down the narrow steps. Casimir swept ahead, checking each landing before waving them forward. At the 2nd floor, he suddenly shoulder-checked Ivy into an alcove, pressing her against the wall. His body shielded her, warm and solid as footsteps echoed above. "Keep still," he murmured. His voice was low, controlled, not the cruel tone from earlier. His hands remained steady on her shoulders, more protective than restraining. When the steps faded, he eased back. "Keep your head down! Stay away from windows!" Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Through a narrow window, Ivy saw flashing lights approach the front gate. 2 patrol cars stopped, and uniformed officers stepped out, demanding entry. Casimir's gate captain stood his ground. "Active security threat, officers. Can't open up until the grounds are secured. Happy to admit one inspector after." "This is obstruction," an officer warned. "This is protocol," the captain countered smoothly. "We have potential explosives on site. Safety first." Ivy started forward. "I can leave with them." "No." Casimir's hand closed around her arm, steering her to a small security office. "Watch this first." He cued footage from the previous night. The grainy video showed Ivy leaving the hospital, exhausted after her shift. 2 men in black followed her to the tram stop, keeping to shadows. They moved with predatory purpose until Valente scouts appeared, intercepting and redirecting them toward the palazzo's outer walls. "They were hunting you," Casimir said quietly. "My men didn't grab you randomly. They got to you first. If you walk out now, whoever wants that chapel open will use you as leverage. They followed you here. They're waiting." The truth hit hard. Leaving meant death. The safest place was, ironically, inside this fortress with the man who'd kidnapped her. The devil she knew versus the ones in the shadows. "Fine," her voice shook. "But I want answers." "Soon?" He studied her face. "For now, you need rest. Proper rest, not that guest room across the compound." The new room he assigned was 1 door from his own suite, a tactical choice that made her pulse jump. The space was elegant but fortified. Reinforced shutters, multiple locks, panic buttons by the bed. "I'll be next door," he said. "Faster response if they try again." Bruna appeared with linens and a determined set to her jaw. "I'm taking the room across the hall. These old bones might be slow, but my ears work fine." Hours passed. Night fell, bringing rain that drummed against the shutters. Ivy lay awake, listening to the palazzo settle into darkness. Footsteps passed her door at regular intervals, guards patrolling. Then different steps, slower and more deliberate. Casimir's shadow paused in the slice of light beneath her door. He waited there, silent guardian rather than hovering threat, before moving on. Her fingers found her locket, thumb tracing the familiar filigree that matched the chapel's door. The metal caught a gleam of distant streetlight, throwing tiny patterns on the wall. Somewhere in this maze of loyalty and danger, truth waited. But for now, she could only endure the night and hope morning brought clarity. The rain intensified, masking any sounds beyond her room. Ivy stared at the ceiling, mind racing through the day's events, the explosion, the rifle sight, the video of her stalkers. Each revelation pushed her deeper into this web of violence and secrets. A clock chimed midnight somewhere in the palazzo's depths. The sound echoed through ancient corridors, counting out the hours until dawn. Ivy turned onto her side, facing the door where Casimir's shadow had paused. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, she felt oddly secure. The lion might be dangerous, but he seemed determined to protect what he considered his. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it brought a strange comfort as rain pattered against the windows and distant thunder rolled across Rome. She was trapped, yes, but also guarded, hunted but shielded. The paradox of finding safety with a dangerous man was not lost on her. Bruna's soft humming drifted from across the hall, an old lullaby that spoke of safer times. The sound mingled with the rain, creating a cocoon of white noise that finally began to lull Ivy towards sleep. Her last conscious thought was of Casimir's steady hands as he'd sheltered her in the alcove, and how different they felt from the cruel grip that had first dragged her into this world. Beyond her window, Rome glittered in the rain, oblivious to the powder keg contained within the palazzo's walls. Security lights cast weird shadows in the courtyard below, where armed men moved like chess pieces through the night. Somewhere out there, behind the rain and darkness, enemies waited. But here, in this strange sanctuary of marble and menace, Ivy found herself drifting into an uneasy peace. Her locket caught one final glint of light before the clouds swallowed the moon completely, leaving only the sound of rain and the knowledge that Casimir kept his vigil. One door away. A soft metallic scrape at her window jolted Ivy from sleep. Her hand found the knife beneath her pillow, heart hammering against her ribs as she strained to listen. 2 gentle knocks at her door made her exhale. Casimir's signal. He slipped inside like a shadow, moving with lethal grace. His eyes swept the room, registering details most would miss. When he approached her bed, she gripped the knife tighter. "Use it on anyone but me," he said dryly, sliding it back under her pillow. His attention shifted to the balcony, where a grappling hook hung against the stone wall, rope disappearing into the darkness below. A soft scuff of leather on marble reached them both. Casimir's posture changed instantly, from alert to predatory. "Bathroom, now." His whisper held no room for argument. Ivy barely made it inside before the intruder cleared the balustrade. The fight that followed was brutally efficient. A crack of breaking bone, a muffled grunt, metal clattering on marble. Through the gap under the door, she saw swift movements, controlled violence. Casimir never let the attacker's blade swing toward the bathroom, keeping himself between danger and Ivy. The fight ended as quickly as it began. When Ivy emerged, 2 guards were already dragging the unconscious intruder away. "Take him to the cold room," Casimir ordered. Full identification protocol. His jaw ticked with barely contained rage, but his voice remained eerily calm. Minutes later, they sat in the staff kitchen, far from the scene of violence. Casimir's hands, capable of such devastating force, looked almost comical, wrapped around a delicate teacup as he prepared her drink. "You should sleep," he said, passing her the cup. Ivy gripped it tightly, trying to still her trembling hands. Something shifted in his expression as he watched her, the first genuine flash of protectiveness she'd seen from him, unrelated to strategy or obligation. When dawn painted the kitchen walls gold, Ivy insisted on checking his injured wrist again. He submitted to her examination without protest, allowing her to turn his arm in the morning light. Her fingers traced old scars that told stories of violence and survival. "Who taught you to fight like that?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. His eyes grew distant. "My father taught me to survive." Those 5 words carried weight, hinting at lessons learned in pain and necessity rather than love. She wanted to ask more, but recognized the steel door closing behind his eyes. The day settled into an uneasy rhythm. Ivy helped Bruna tend to a kitchen boy who'd sprained his ankle carrying supplies. The palazzo's pulse had changed, not exactly relaxed, but less fraught with immediate tension. Guards still patrolled, but their steps were measured rather than urgent. Afternoon light slanted through high windows as Ivy walked the corridors, her footsteps echoing on marble floors. She found herself at the chapel threshold, studying the intricate filigree that matched her locket's pattern. The door stood silent and threatening, its secrets locked behind layers of steel and explosive traps. When she returned to her room at twilight, a folded note waited on her pillow. Casimir's precise handwriting delivered a clear command. "Stay clear of that door until I am beside you." The palazzo settled into evening shadows. From her window, Ivy watched guards change shifts in the courtyard below. The attack had changed something fundamental in the house's atmosphere. Servants moved in pairs now, security doubled on every gate. In the kitchen, Bruna stress-baked enough bread to feed an army, the familiar scent offering comfort amid chaos. She shooed away guards who tried to sample the cooling loaves, but secretly slipped them pieces when she thought no one was looking. Ivy helped her clean up, finding solace in ordinary tasks. The routine of wiping counters and storing ingredients provided an anchor against the surreal reality of her situation. Bruna hummed while she worked, an old Italian lullaby that seemed to soothe the palazzo's raw nerves. "He's different with you," Bruna said suddenly, up to her elbows in soap suds. "What do you mean?" "The boss, he's..." She searched for words. "Careful. Like you're something that could break but shouldn't be hidden away." Ivy thought of his hands on the teacup, his body blocking the attacker's blade, the note's protective command. She remembered the clinical efficiency of his violence contrasted with the gentle way he'd checked her for injuries afterward. The kitchen boy limped past, ankle freshly wrapped, carrying a tray of coffee to the security office. Outside, the sun dipped below Rome's ancient skyline, painting the courtyard in shades of amber and shadow. Another night approached, bringing its own set of dangers and secrets. Guards lit the exterior floodlights, creating a harsh barrier of illumination around the palazzo's perimeter. The grappling hook had been removed, but its shadow seemed to linger on the wall beneath Ivy's window, a reminder that safety was relative and peace was temporary. In the growing darkness, she could hear Casimir's voice carrying from his study, issuing orders for the night watch. His tone held the same controlled power she'd witnessed during the fight, but now she understood it better. He wasn't just protecting his territory, he was protecting his people. Morning sunlight filtered through the narrow window of Bruna's cramped office, illuminating decades of dust on crowded shelves. At precisely 9, the maid closed her door with unusual care, her weathered hands trembling slightly as she lifted a worn velvet box from a locked drawer. "Some secrets way too heavy," Bruna murmured, opening the box. Inside lay several tarnished keys and an enamel pin that made Ivy's breath catch. 2 crossing lilies, identical to her locket's design. "That's," Ivy started, "your mother's mark. Valeria Laurent." Bruna's voice dropped to barely a whisper. She wasn't just an accountant. She worked with the Valente bankers, tracking money that could destroy 3 families if the numbers ever came to light. Ivy's world tilted. Her mother had given her nothing but a new surname and hurried instructions when they fled their home city. No explanations, no history, just rules about staying hidden. "She wore that locket during secret meetings," Bruna continued, eyes distant with memory. "Always tucked it away before leaving the palazzo. Smart woman, your mother. Careful, until the ledger dispute." "What dispute?" Ivy's throat felt dry. "Some records went missing, bad ones, the kind that buy silence or sell souls." Bruna's fingers worried the edge of her apron. 3 days later, so did she. "Why tell me this now? Fear kept me quiet then. Shame keeps me talking now." Bruna met her eyes. "That chapel wasn't trapped until last week. Someone wants what your mother hid." Ivy's feet carried her to Casimir's study before conscious thought caught up. She found him reviewing security reports, his posture alert despite the early hour. "You knew?" It wasn't a question. "About my mother." Casimir set down his papers, watching her with careful consideration. "I recognized the name. Suspected more when I saw your locket." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Would you have believed me?" His voice held no mockery. "Or would you have run?" Ivy paced the study's length, processing. "Bruna thinks the chapel lock might not be just explosives. that it could be mechanical, keyed to the emblem. Yes. He stood, moving to a wall map of the palazzo. The timing fits. New threats appear just as you arrive wearing Valeria's mark. You need my locket to open it. We need to test the theory first, with proper bomb support. He turned to face her fully. Your choice whether to help. I won't force this. Lunch arrived while they discussed possibilities. Servants laid out an elegant spread in the formal dining room, the normalcy almost jarring against their conversation's weight. Enzo joined them, his calculating gaze following Ivy's movements. Perhaps, he suggested smoothly, we could return the civilian to our competitors, cool these heated waters. Casimir's look could have frozen flame. She stays. Ivy noticed how Enzo's smile didn't reach his eyes, how his fingers tapped an irregular rhythm on the tablecloth. Something about his suggestion felt wrong, but she couldn't place why. The afternoon stretched like pulled taffy. Ivy helped Bruna with household tasks, trying to maintain routine while her mind raced. Every pass by the chapel door made her locket feel heavier. Guards rotated shifts. Technicians consulted in whispers. Ivy caught fragments of conversation about trigger mechanisms and pressure plates. The palazzo held its breath, waiting for night. In her temporary room, Ivy traced the locket's familiar pattern. Her mother had given it to her on her 16th birthday, calling it a family heirloom. Now she wondered if it was really a key, meant to unlock more than memories. I have to know, she told her reflection. The truth about her mother waited behind that door. The choice was simple, even if the consequences weren't. Bruna brought her dinner, simple pasta with fresh bread, and sat while she ate. The old maid's presence felt protective, maternal in a way that made Ivy's chest ache. Your mother was kind to me, Bruna said suddenly. Treated me like a person, not furniture. Whatever's in that chapel, she had her reasons. Ivy pushed her plate away. Did she ever mention me during those meetings? Once, she was looking at a photo in her wallet. Said her little girl was why she had to fix things. Bruna patted Ivy's hand. Get some rest before tonight. You'll need clear eyes. The palazzo grew quiet as afternoon faded. Ivy lay down fully dressed, knowing she should sleep, but expecting restlessness. Instead, exhaustion dragged her under immediately. She woke hours later to soft darkness and the sound of rain. No dreams had disturbed her short rest, as if her mind needed the blank space before what came next. The clock read 11:30 p.m. Through her window, she could see guards positioning themselves around the courtyard's perimeter. Flashlight beams cut through the drizzle as bomb technicians made final checks of their equipment. Bruna appeared with fresh tea and clean clothes, practical dark items that wouldn't reflect light. The old maid's hands were steady now, her fear replaced by grim determination. Whatever happens, Bruna said, helping Ivy pin her hair back. Remember you chose this. That matters. Ivy touched her locket, feeling the weight of legacy and mystery it carried. In less than an hour, she would learn if it truly was a key, and what secrets her mother had locked away. The truth waited behind steel and explosives, preserved in a chapel that had become a vault. Rain tapped against the palazzo's windows as the small group gathered at the chapel door. The dim work lights cast long shadows across the marble floor, turning familiar faces into masks of light and dark, their features half swallowed by the gloom. Water streaked down the ancient glass panes, creating watery ripples that danced across the polished stone beneath their feet. Ready? Casimir asked, his voice barely above a whisper, the single word hanging in the tense air between them. Ivy's fingers trembled slightly as she removed her locket. The delicate chain pooled in her palm, the metal warm from resting against her skin all these hours. The gold caught what little light there was, gleaming with soft promise. She approached the door, where two bomb technicians waited with their equipment, their faces grim behind protective visors that reflected her own anxious expression back at her. The pattern matches exactly, Bruna murmured, squinting at the filigree, her weathered face tight with concentration. Right there where the lilies cross, just like she showed me all those years ago. Ivy lined up her locket with the ornate metalwork, holding her breath as the pieces aligned. The silence felt heavy as she pressed it into place, the weight of everyone's stares burning into her back. A soft click echoed through the corridor, followed by the whisper of metal sliding against metal, a sound that raised goosebumps along her arms. A hidden plate retracted, revealing an intricate keyway beneath, its brass teeth gleaming dully in the shadows. Hold, the lead technician commanded, scanning the mechanism with practiced eyes. His equipment beeped softly as he worked. Secondary trigger system. Pressure. Pins connected to... Yes, Deadfall charge above. Enough explosives to bring down half the ceiling. Enzo shifted his weight, the movement drawing Ivy's attention away from the deadly mechanism. His face showed only professional interest, lips pressed together in concentration, but something in his stance felt wrong. Too alert, too eager. His fingers twitched once before he clasped them behind his back. "Bruna," Casimir said quietly, his dark eyes never leaving the door. "You remember the sequence?" The old maid nodded, her chin lifting with fierce determination. A strand of gray hair escaped her tight bun, but she paid it no mind. "The lily pattern, like a cross but reversed at the bottom. Valeria showed me once, said it was important to remember, said someday it might save a life." Her voice cracked slightly on the name. Under the technician's guidance, Ivy began lifting the pins one by one. Each one required precise pressure. Too much or too little would trigger the charge. Sweat beaded on her forehead, despite the cool air trickling down her temple. Her medical training kept her hands steady, the same calm focus she summoned for emergency surgeries now channeled into this delicate operation. As she worked, a faint reflection caught her eye, a tiny glint where there should be none. Above the door, barely visible in the shadowed molding, a lens winked in the work light. Her gaze followed the nearly invisible wire to where it disappeared behind a column, emerging near her medical bag that sat innocently against the wall. Her pulse quickened, a flutter of panic that she quickly suppressed. Someone wanted to record the sequence, someone inside the palazzo. Keeping her movements natural, she shifted closer to Casimir until her shoulder nearly touched his arm. "There's a camera," she breathed, barely moving her lips, her words a ghost of sound. "Above us, wired to my bag." His expression didn't change, not a muscle twitching in his face, but his shoulders tensed beneath his tailored jacket. He waited until she'd completed the current pin sequence before speaking, his timing deliberately casual. "Stop work. Full sweep." His tone allowed no argument, calm but charged with authority. "Check everything at head height now." The technicians found the camera quickly once they knew where to look. The tiny device was expertly hidden, its housing barely larger than a coin, nestled in a decorative carving. But the transmitter attached to it told a different story. A custom-made piece bearing distinctive initials etched into the metal casing. "Evie!" Casimir read the marking, his voice dangerously soft, like velvet over steel. His eyes, when they lifted to find Enzo's face, had turned to frost. "Care to explain, Enzo?" "Ah, that!" Enzo's smile was smooth as oil on water, appearing without reaching his eyes. "I confiscated it earlier from the North Wing. Meant to report it, but with everything else happening..." He spread his hands in a gesture of apology that seemed rehearsed. "When?" Casimir's question cut like a blade through the pretense. "Yesterday afternoon, during the second sweep." The answer came without hesitation, polished and ready. Ivy watched the exchange, noting how Enzo's explanation came too quickly, too practiced. A flush of color had appeared high on his cheekbones, barely visible in the dim light. Casimir clearly noticed too. His eyes had gone cold, all warmth draining away as he studied his consigliere, the man who had stood at his side for years. Rather than confront Enzo directly, Casimir pocketed the device with deliberate care. "We'll discuss this later." The threat in his voice was subtle but unmistakable, a promise rather than a warning. "Continue with the door!" They resumed their positions, but the atmosphere had shifted, crackling with unspoken suspicion. Enzo remained where Casimir could see him, his practiced smile now strained at the edges, a thin veneer covering what Ivy suspected was rising panic. The final sequence took another 20 minutes of painstaking work. Ivy's hand stayed steady as she lifted the last pins. Guided by Bruna's memory and the technician's expertise, the explosive arm's indicator light shifted from angry red to cautious amber, casting a sickly glow across their faces. "Manual bypass possible now," the lead tech announced, his voice muffled behind his mask. "Beginning detonator shut down. Everyone stay absolutely still." Time seemed to crawl as they disabled the last failsafes, each second stretched thin with tension. When the chapel door finally swung open with a groan of ancient hinges, revealing a hidden recess behind the altar, Ivy felt lightheaded with relief and tension. The small chamber beyond lay in shadow, untouched for decades. "Clear!" called the second technician after scanning the chamber with methodical precision. No additional devices detected. Floors stable, too. Casimir touched Ivy's elbow lightly, his fingers warm through the thin fabric of her sleeve. "That's enough for tonight. We'll examine the contents tomorrow when we're fresh." The group dispersed gradually, like actors leaving a stage after a tense performance. Enzo departed first, his footsteps too measured to be casual, shoulders rigid beneath his expensive suit. The technicians followed with their equipment, carefully packing away tools that had saved their lives. Then Bruna, who squeezed Ivy's hand as she passed, her palm rough and comforting. "You did good, child," the old woman whispered. "Your mother would be proud." The walk to Ivy's room felt longer than usual, each corridor stretching into the next. Casimir stayed close, his presence both protective and alert, scanning each shadow they passed. They passed guards at their posts, the palazzo's security heightened after the evening's revelations, men with hard eyes and weapons at the ready. At her door, Casimir paused, his face half turned toward the corridor they'd left behind. "We'll talk about Enzo at dawn." His voice was quiet but certain, a decision already made. "Get some rest, lock your door." Ivy nodded, fighting to keep her expression neutral despite the cold realization settling in her stomach like a stone. The greatest threat wasn't outside the palazzo walls. It sat at Casimir's own table, wearing a trusted advisor's face, sharing his bread and secrets. The lock clicked behind her with familiar finality, the sound oddly comforting in its solidity. Through her window, she could see the chapel wing, its shadows deeper now that they knew what secrets it held. Rain still streaked the glass, blurring the world beyond. The clock on her nightstand read 1:10 a.m., its red numbers counting out minutes until dawn, when everything would change. Morning light pierced the chapel's stained glass, painting rainbow patterns across the marble floor. Ivy stepped carefully through the threshold, Casimir and Bruna flanking her as guards secured the perimeter with practiced efficiency. The chapel's interior smelled of old incense and secrets. Ornate columns stretched toward a vaulted ceiling, while carved saints gazed down from their niches with serene faces that had witnessed decades of Valente history. "There," Bruna pointed to an elaborately decorated reliquary behind the altar. "That's where Valeria would pray. Every Sunday, same spot." Casimir ran his fingers along the reliquary's edge, pressing specific points until something clicked. A panel slid aside, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay 2 items. A leather-bound ledger, its pages yellowed with age, and a slim metal drive that looked surprisingly modern. Ivy's hands trembled as she reached for a faded ribbon marking a page in the ledger. Her mother's distinctive handwriting covered the silk in flowing script, and at the bottom, the initials VL made her throat constrict. "I remember her writing these," Bruna whispered, touching the ribbon gently. "Always so precise, your mother, even with her notes." Casimir carried both items to his study, where a man with thick-rimmed glasses waited at an offline workstation. "Marcus," Casimir nodded to the hacker. "What can you tell us?" Marcus examined the drive, whistling softly. "Clever setup. It's a hybrid system. The physical ledger provides cipher keys for the digital files. We'll need both to access anything meaningful." They gathered around as Marcus began his work. The first cipher sequence from the ledger opened a series of encrypted folders. Banking routes appeared on screen, alongside lists of payments and power transfers between 3 major crime families. "These transactions," Marcus pointed, "they're all connected to a specific date, the day Valeria disappeared." Ivy leaned closer, absorbing the details. The numbers told a story of carefully orchestrated power redistribution, all managed by one man, Casimir's father. "He knew," Casimir said quietly. His face held a complex mix of emotions. "My father arranged it all. A peaceful transition instead of a war that would have destroyed everyone." The ledger was insurance, Ivy realized. Mom took it to ensure the peace held. Casimir nodded slowly. "I kept it hidden for the same reason. Some monsters can't be fought head-on. This gave me leverage while I rebuilt the house, made it something different than what my father intended." Sunlight shifted across the study as they worked, the hours sliding past as Marcus decoded more files. They agreed to focus only on recent data that might identify their current attackers. "The drive's secure," Marcus announced as afternoon light faded, placing it in a specialized Faraday case. "No one can access it remotely now." Ivy stepped onto the balcony, needing air. The ribbon from the ledger was soft between her fingers, a tangible connection to her mother. The truth settled into her bones. Her mother hadn't abandoned her, but sacrificed everything to keep her safe. And Casimir's father, of all people, had made it possible. The balcony stones were warm from the day's sun. Below, guards patrolled with heightened vigilance, their movements precise and coordinated. The palazzo felt different now, less like a prison and more like a fortress protecting secrets that could reshape their world. She heard Casimir's measured footsteps behind her. He came to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. The setting sun cast long shadows across the courtyard as he spoke. "You have my house's protection until you tell me to withdraw it." His words hung in the evening air, heavy with meaning. The clock in the study struck 6, its chimes echoing across the quiet courtyard. Ivy held the ribbon tighter, feeling the weight of history, sacrifice, and unexpected allies in its delicate threads. Through the chapel's stained glass, the last rays of sunlight created patterns that seemed to dance across the courtyard stones. Guards moved through their rotations, weapons at ready, while birds settled into the palazzo's towers for the night. The air carried the scent of jasmine from the garden below, mixing with the lingering incense from the chapel. In the study behind them, Marcus continued his careful work, the soft click of keys a steady rhythm. Bruna's voice drifted up from the kitchen, directing staff in their evening duties. Her familiar authority, a reminder that some things remained constant even as secrets unraveled. The ribbon in Ivy's hands held years of her mother's sacrifice, encoded in silk and ink. Each character was a testament to Valeria's determination to protect both her daughter and a fragile peace. The weight of that knowledge settled around Ivy's shoulders like a mantle, heavy but somehow right. Casimir remained beside her, a silent sentinel as the day's revelations settled around them. His offer of protection wasn't just words. It was a reformation of old alliances, a chance to honor the careful balance his father and her mother had struck years ago. The evening air cooled against their skin as 6 o'clock arrived, marking the end of a day that had changed everything. History had come full circle in the palazzo's ancient walls, bringing with it both answers and new questions. But for now, in this moment, they stood together as the sun set. Guardians of a legacy neither had expected to inherit. The great hall's chandeliers cast golden light over too much silver and too many watching eyes. Ivy sat rigidly at the long table, aware of every clink of crystal, every measured breath. Enzo occupied his place at Casimir's right, perfectly pressed suit, a stark contrast to his thin, calculating smile. "Perhaps," Enzo suggested, cutting his meat with surgical precision, "we should consider returning the civilian to Silvio Rinaldi. A good faith gesture could end these unfortunate attacks." The words hung in the air like poison. Casimir didn't look up from his plate. "No." His voice was soft, final. Tension stretched across the table. Guards shifted along the walls, hands never far from weapons. Bruna hovered near the service door, her worried gaze darting between Enzo and Casimir. After dinner, Ivy escaped to the citrus garden. Orange blossoms perfumed the evening air, their sweetness a relief from the suffocating formality inside. Gravel crunched softly under her feet as she walked between the neat rows of trees. She heard Casimir before she saw him, measured footsteps keeping pace at a distance. Close enough to reach her if needed, far enough to give her space to think. The consideration in that balance struck her deeply. When she finally turned to face him, shadows played across his features. The palazzo's lights gleamed behind him like a crown of stars. "What will you do?" she asked. "If the ledger condemns your own blood." His eyes met hers, unwavering. "I'll cut it away." In that moment, she saw past the careful control to the boy he'd been, shaped into a weapon but choosing precision over cruelty. A man who'd inherited violence but sought to master it rather than be mastered by it. The air between them changed, charged with something electric and inevitable. When he stepped closer, she didn't retreat. His hand came up to cup her face with impossible gentleness, thumb brushing her cheek like she was something precious. The kiss was slow, deliberate, a vow sealed in silence. Heat bloomed where their lips met, promise and restraint tangled together. Then he pulled back, though everything in his posture spoke of wanting to stay. "I won't take more," he murmured. "Not until you're safe. Not until you choose this. Choose me, without fear clouding your judgment." They returned to the study, where Marcus had left the ledger and drive secured. Hours blurred together as they worked through pages of names and dates, building a timeline of betrayals and alliances. Ivy's medical training helped her spot patterns in the data. Regular payments that looked like legitimate business but masked darker. Transactions. Bruna brought coffee, then tea, her presence a quiet comfort as midnight came and went. The palazzo settled into its nighttime rhythm of patrol rotations and whispered passwords. Around 2 a.m, exhaustion finally caught up with Ivy. The letters began swimming before her eyes as she curled deeper into the leather chair. She was vaguely aware of warm weight settling across her shoulders, Casimir's jacket carrying his scent of sandalwood and clean cotton. Through half-closed eyes, she watched him pause, studying her face for a long moment before moving to stand guard at the window. His posture shifted subtly as a distant engine rumble caught his attention, ever vigilant even in these quiet hours. The study held them in its leather and wood embrace. Lamplight gleamed on the ledger's ancient pages, on the modern steel of the Faraday case, on the silver, threading in Casimir's perfectly tailored shirt. Outside, the garden's citrus trees swayed gently in the night breeze, their shadows dancing across the courtyard stones. Guards moved in coordinated patterns through the darkness, their footsteps a steady rhythm on the gravel paths. The palazzo's ancient walls seemed to breathe around them, holding centuries of secrets in their stone hearts. Ivy's locket rested against her collarbone, warm from her skin. Its weight felt different now, knowing its true purpose. Like her mother's love, it had always been both protection and key, waiting for the right moment to reveal its nature. The jacket around her shoulders was heavy with Casimir's lingering warmth. She could feel the subtle signs of wear in the silk lining, evidence that even a man who wore perfection like armor had moments of humanity. His scent wrapped around her, oddly comforting despite everything that had brought her here. Through barely open eyes, she watched him at the window. Power lived in every line of his body, but it was contained, controlled. He'd learned to harness violence without being consumed by it. The same hands that could break bones with surgical precision had touched her face with impossible tenderness. The study's clock ticked steadily, marking moments between heartbeats. Old books lined the walls, their spines a testament to generations of power and knowledge. The ledger on the desk held newer secrets, ones that could reshape the careful balance of their world. Casimir remained at his post, alert to every shadow and sound. His reflection in the window glass was overlaid against the dark garden beyond, making him seem both present and ethereal. Guard and guardian, weapon and shield, man and mystery, all these pieces coming together in the quiet hours of night. The engine sound that had caught his attention faded into distance, but his vigilance never wavered. He stood watch as Ivy drifted deeper into sleep, protecting both her rest and the secrets they'd uncovered. In the space between waking and dreams, she felt oddly safe under his careful watch, despite all the dangers still circling their shared walls. Dawn broke with violence. The thunder of engines shattered the morning quiet as a white courier van plowed through the service entrance, metal screaming against ancient stone. Before the dust settled, smoke grenades arced through the air, blooming into thick gray clouds across the courtyard. Rinaldi's men moved like shadows through the smoke, their precision speaking of careful planning. Guards shouted and gunfire crackled, but the attackers had the advantage of surprise and superior position. Inside the palazzo, screens flickered to life with Enzo's carefully crafted message broadcasting across local channels. His voice dripped with false concern as he spoke of a civilian nurse held against her will, naming Ivy directly and painting Casimir as a monster. Police sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer with each passing minute. "Bastard!" Casimir snarled, watching the broadcast. "He's trying to box us in." The chaos reached its peak when screams erupted from the kitchen wing. Bruna's voice cut off mid-shout, followed by the heavy sound of a body being dragged. Seconds later, Casimir's radio crackled with Rinaldi's smooth, cultured tones. "The ledger and the nurse Valente, Tiburtina Freight Depot, sunrise tomorrow, or your loyal maid dies screaming. You know I keep my promises." Casimir's face went cold as marble. "Get her to the wine cellar," he ordered his men, gesturing at Ivy. "No." Ivy stepped forward, chin raised. "That's exactly what Rinaldi expects. Passive pieces to be moved around the board. But we can turn this trap against him." "Absolutely not." "Listen to me," she insisted. "Use me as controlled bait. I'll wear a heartbeat transmitter here," she touched her sternum, "and an earbud for your voice. Position snipers on the depot cranes. Time a shunted freight car to cut off his reinforcements." Casimir's jaw worked as he considered her words. The plan was solid, dangerous, but with better odds than a frontal assault. "The risk is necessary," she finished. "You know I'm right." Hours blurred together as they prepared. The hacker worked frantically to erase Ivy's digital presence, while Casimir's men readied gear from the armory. A brief open mic from Bruna's location let them triangulate the warehouse where she was being held. Tactical maps spread across Casimir's desk as they refined the plan. Every angle, every contingency was examined and accounted for. The heartbeat transmitter was tested repeatedly, its steady rhythm matching Ivy's pulse on multiple screens. As midnight approached, Ivy stood in dark tactical gear, checking the fit of her vest, while Casimir's hands moved with surprising gentleness through her hair, securing it away from her face. "One word," he said softly, fingers lingering at her nape, "and I burn the city." The palazzo hummed with preparation around them. Guards moved weapons and gear, while communications teams tested frequencies and signals. Medical supplies were packed, routes were memorized, and backup plans were drilled until they became muscle memory. In the armory, specialists helped Ivy adjust her equipment. The transmitter adhered securely to her skin, its signal strong and steady. The earbud nestled perfectly, tested multiple times to ensure Casimir's voice would come through clear and unmistakable. Maps of the freight depot covered one wall, marked with sniper positions and angles of fire. The timing of the shunted freight car was calculated to the second, its path designed to split Rinaldi's forces at the crucial moment. Outside, the night air carried the scent of coming rain. Guards patrolled with heightened vigilance, every shadow now a potential threat. The earlier attack had left scars on the ancient stonework, a reminder that even these fortress walls could be breached. Bruna's empty kitchen stood as silent testimony to what was at stake. Her half-prepared meals still sat on counters, her usual bustle replaced by an absence that felt like a physical wound in the palazzo's heart. In Casimir's study, final preparations continued. The ledger was secured in a specially designed case, its contents potentially as deadly as any weapon. The hacker monitored police frequencies, tracking the ripples of Enzo's betrayal through official channels. Ivy checked her gear one last time, the knife in her boot, the slim pick set at her wrist, the backup transmitter tucked beneath her collar. Each piece was a thread in the web they were weaving, a calculated risk in a dangerous game. The moon cast sharp shadows across the courtyard as clouds gathered overhead. Tomorrow's sunrise would bring either victory or disaster, with no middle ground possible. The weight of what they planned settled over the palazzo like a heavy cloak. Teams moved through their final checks with practiced efficiency. Communications verified frequencies, medics prepared field kits, and tactical units memorized their assigned positions. Every person knew their role in the complex dance they would perform at dawn. In the quiet moment before action, Ivy stood at the window of Casimir's study, watching lightning flicker on the horizon. The city sprawled before them, unaware of the power struggle about to unfold in its industrial margins. Rain needled down in the murky pre-dawn, drumming against the armored vehicles as they rolled to a stop at the Tiburtina freight depot. The hulking cranes loomed overhead like ancient gallows, their shadows stretching across puddle-strewn concrete. Crows bickered on the rusted beams, their harsh cries echoing through the industrial wasteland. 5 a.m. Ivy clutched the ledger case, her heartbeat transmitter steady against her skin. Casimir touched her shoulder once, a silent reassurance, before melting away to take his sniper position. 2 tactical teams flanked him, while an engineer crouched by the freight line controls, waiting to trigger the shunt. Movement flickered at the far end of the yard. Rinaldi's men emerged from the shadows, pushing Bruna forward. Even from this distance, Ivy could see the maid's face was bruised, but she walked steadily, chin high with defiance. "Such a waste of resources," Enzo's voice crackled over the open channel, no longer hiding behind pretense. He stepped into view beside Rinaldi, smirking. "Think of it, Casimir. A fresh start without all this dead weight. No more reform, no more soft choices." Ivy's earpiece carried Casimir's whispered command. "Begin!" She stepped forward, boots splashing through oily puddles. "I need proof she's unharmed," she called out, voice carrying across the yard. "And I want a full count of your men. No surprises." Rinaldi's patience visibly frayed as she asked detailed questions about Bruna's condition, demanded to see empty hands, questioned every shadow. Rain soaked through her tactical gear, but she kept talking, watching the subtle shifts in position that told her the teams were in place. "Enough games," Rinaldi snarled. "The ledger, now!" The freight car rolled silently on wet tracks, gathering momentum. In the split second before it blocked the sightlines, Ivy saw Casimir's first shots take down 2 riflemen on the warehouse roof. Then everything exploded into chaos. Gunfire crackled across the yard like vicious lightning. Ivy dropped and rolled as bullets sparked off concrete. Through her earpiece, she heard Casimir coordinating his teams with lethal precision, his voice ice-cold and steady. She sprinted to Bruna, using the confusion as cover. The knife Casimir had given her sliced through the zip ties binding the maid's wrists. "Run!" she hissed, shoving Bruna toward the waiting extraction team. A shadow loomed. Rinaldi himself stood over her, eyes fixed on her mother's locket with predatory recognition. "That's the key," he breathed. "Show me the sequence, girl." He lunged for the necklace. Ivy drove the knife up and in, feeling it slide between his ribs. She twisted the blade just as Casimir had taught her. Rinaldi's eyes went wide with shock before he crumpled. Across the yard, Enzo charged at Casimir with a sub-compact pistol. Their fight was brutal, all elbows and knees on the rain-slick concrete. But Casimir moved like a force of nature, gradually wearing Enzo down until he had him in a chokehold. "You don't betray my house and breathe," Casimir whispered, and left his former consigliere broken on the ground. Distant sirens wailed as the rain began to slack. Bruna was safely in one of the armored cars, being tended by a medic. Ivy stood shivering, adrenaline fading, until she felt heavy wool settle around her shoulders, Casimir's coat still warm from his body. "I'm here," he murmured, staying close as his men methodically swept the depot. The scene transformed into controlled efficiency. Tactical teams secured the perimeter, while medical units treated the wounded. Evidence teams photographed the scene before cleanup crews moved, to erase all traces of the confrontation. Ivy watched it all through a surreal haze, her mother's locket heavy against her chest. The transmitter still broadcast her heartbeat, strong and steady despite everything. She could see Casimir tracking the signal on his phone, his shoulders relaxing fractionally with each regular pulse. Rain dripped from the crane girders, washing away blood and brass casings. The freight car that had split the yard sat silent on its tracks, its role in their victory complete. Dawn was beginning to break over the industrial wasteland, painting the clouds in shades of steel and gold. Casimir's men moved with practiced precision, erasing their presence from the depot. Bodies were removed, shell casings collected, security cameras wiped. Within hours, there would be no evidence of the night's violence, just another abandoned corner of the city's industrial decay. The crows returned to their perches, watching the cleanup with beady eyes. Their harsh calls echoed off concrete and steel, a discordant chorus accompanying the efficient dismantling of the battlefield. Bruna's voice drifted from the car, giving quiet thanks to the medic attending her wounds. Ivy felt Casimir's presence at her back, solid and unwavering. His coat enveloped her like armor, carrying his scent of gunpowder and expensive cologne. Together they watched his men restore order to chaos, transforming violence into silence with mechanical efficiency. Rain-soaked clothes left puddles on the palazzo's marble floors as medical teams worked in organized chaos. In the main salon, converted to a temporary infirmary, Ivy moved with precise efficiency despite her own aches, checking Bruna's bruises and potential concussion. "Stop fussing," Bruna grumbled, but submitted to the examination. "I've had worse from falling off stepladders." "Humor me," Ivy replied, gentle fingers probing for hidden injuries. "Any dizziness, nausea?" Only after ensuring Bruna was stable did Ivy allow the house doctor to examine her. She winced as his careful hands found tender spots along her ribs, bruised but not broken. Across the room, Casimir's eyes never left her, even as he coordinated cleanup crews and damage control. The hacker worked frantically at a secured terminal, strings of code reflecting in his glasses. "Got it," he announced suddenly. "The final encryption key was hidden in the ledger's page numbers, but—" He trailed off, face grim. They gathered around the screen. The decoded files revealed Valeria's masterwork. Carefully planted access codes that would expose every major crime syndicate's operations to Interpol simultaneously. A dead woman's revenge, primed to trigger if she vanished. Jesus, Ivy breathed, understanding the weight of what her mother had created. This would burn everything down. Not just the guilty, the hacker explained. These routes, they're also used by witness protection networks, underground railroads, for trafficking survivors. Burning them means burning everyone who depends on them. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Ivy. She stood at the window, watching dawn paint the courtyard gold. Power thrummed beneath her fingers, the power to demolish empires, to expose decades of corruption. But at what cost? How many innocent lives would be caught in the inferno? "I want it gone," she said finally. "The codes, the triggers, all of it." She turned to face Casimir. "But I have conditions." His eyes met hers, steady and intense. "Name them." "Every trafficking pipeline under your control, dismantled. Complete financial records showing funds redirected to survivor support programs, and your empire restructured to run without human cargo." She stepped closer. "I want it in writing, witnessed and enforceable." "Done," he said without hesitation. "I'm not finished. Bruna and our friendly hacker here become oversight officers with full access to verify compliance." She held his gaze. "This isn't a request, it's the price." A knife appeared in his hand. Without breaking eye contact, he drew the blade across his palm. "By blood and honor, I swear it." Red droplets fell on pristine paper as he signed the agreement. The tension that had wound through the palazzo for days finally snapped. Casimir crossed the space between them in 2 strides, one hand threading through her hair as he kissed her with devastating intensity. Ivy met his passion with her own, fingers curling into his shirt. They barely made it to his chambers. His touch was reverent, worshipful, as if she were something precious and wild he couldn't quite believe he was allowed to hold. Ivy matched his fervor with her own need, claiming him as thoroughly as he claimed her. "Mine!" He growled against her throat, and she gasped her agreement. Their coupling was explosive, tender one moment, fierce the next. His hands mapped every inch of her skin, while she marked his shoulders with crescents from her nails. They moved together with increasing urgency until pleasure crashed over them both in waves. Later, as false dawn painted the sky in pearls and smoke, they lay tangled in silk sheets. Ivy traced idle patterns on his chest, while Casimir's fingers combed through her hair. Below in the chapel, the ledger's drive rested in its new Faraday case, sealed behind mechanical locks with an altered pattern known only to them and Bruna. "What happens now?" Ivy murmured against his skin. "Now," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple, "we rebuild, better than before." The palazzo settled around them, its ancient stones holding centuries of secrets. In the courtyard, birds began their morning songs. Bruna could be heard in the distance, already organizing the day's tasks despite her injuries. The hacker's keyboard clicks echoed from the study as he implemented new security protocols. Ivy felt Casimir's heartbeat under her palm, strong and steady. The weapon-sharp edges of him had softened, but only for her. To the rest of the world, he remained steel and shadow, except now those qualities would serve a better purpose. The morning light strengthened, gilding the room's Baroque details. Their clothes lay scattered across priceless rugs where they'd been hastily discarded. Ivy's medical bag sat in one corner, no longer containing hidden cameras or threats. The knife he'd given her rested on the bedside table, cleaned and within easy reach, a reminder that safety was never guaranteed, only fought for. Casimir's hands continued their gentle exploration of her skin, pausing over each bruise and scrape from the depot fight. His touch carried equal measures of possession and reverence, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. Ivy understood the feeling. This dangerous man who killed without hesitation had given her the power to reshape his world, trusting her to choose mercy over vengeance. The palazzo stirred to life around them. Guards changed shifts, kitchen staff began breakfast preparations, and medical teams packed up their supplies. Through it all, they remained wrapped in their private sanctuary, trading soft touches and softer words as the sun rose over Rome. In TPS, docs, google.com, or document D1A of 9BKA UJQPT or RM3AYDFFSKR, M war at R9 UAV the 24I at USP box. Sharing. 3 weeks after the depot battle, Rome's underworld had shifted like tectonic plates. Casimir systematically dismantled Rinaldi's empire, converting blood money into healing hands. The ledger's data, wielded like a surgical knife, cut away corruption while preserving innocent networks. Sunlight now streamed freely through the palazzo's windows, no longer blocked by heavy drapes and paranoia. Armed guards remained, but their presence felt protective rather than oppressive. In the courtyard, Bruna directed a small army of gardeners, her voice carrying across beds of fresh herbs and climbing roses. She'd transformed the kitchens too, replacing the stark efficiency with warmth and purpose. Ivy stood in what would soon be the free clinic's reception area, running her fingers over exposed brick walls. Construction dust sparkled in shafts of afternoon light. The deed in her hand bore her name in clean black ink. No conditions, no hidden clauses. "The funding is guaranteed," Casimir said from behind her, his footsteps quiet on the unfinished floor. "A separate foundation, untouchable by anyone else." She turned to face him. "You're really doing this?" "I keep my promises." His eyes softened as they always did when looking at her. "Especially to you." They walked the space together. Examination rooms, laboratory, private consulting offices. Each area carefully planned to serve those who'd never had access to proper care. Through the windows, she could see the neighborhood already responding to change. Hope replacing wariness. Later, in the palazzo's chapel, they stood before the saint's reliquary. Casimir placed a single white lily where the ledger's compartment had been, a quiet tribute to Valeria Laurent, who died protecting more than just numbers. Ivy touched the marble, remembering her mother's strength. "She would be proud," Casimir said softly, "of you, of what her sacrifice built." The evening air carried jasmine and citrus as people gathered in the courtyard. Casimir had purged his inner circle of corruption, replacing betrayers with those who'd sworn to uphold the new order. The remaining staff watched as he took Ivy's hand. The ring caught the last rays of sunset as he slipped it onto her finger, platinum and sapphires, elegant but strong. His voice carried across the stones. "No one touches what's mine." Not a cage around her, but a shield between her and those who do her harm. Bruna beamed from her place of honor, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. The hacker, now officially chief of cybersecurity, raised a glass in silent toast. Even the guards smiled, their usual stoicism cracking at the edges. Later, alone in his study, Casimir pulled Ivy close. "I was born a weapon," he murmured against her hair. "You made me a man." She traced the scar on his wrist, their beginning when she'd been dragged in to heal him. "You were always both. You just needed permission to choose." Midnight found them on their balcony, the city spread below like scattered stars. Church bells tolled the hour as Ivy unclasped her mother's locket. The compartment that once held destruction now lay empty, waiting for new purpose. "We should fill it," she said, turning to face him, "with the photo from our first clinic discharge. Something healing instead of harmful." His fingers closed around hers, warm and sure. A better legacy. Rome hummed around them. Cars and distant voices, the eternal city's heartbeat. The dangers weren't gone, but they'd been contained, transformed into something protective instead of destructive. Their love hadn't softened the edges of who they were. It had given those edges purpose. In the garden below, Bruna could be heard scolding a night guard for tracking mud across her clean paths. The normalcy of it made Ivy smile. 3 weeks ago, they'd been surrounded by threats. Now they were building something lasting. The clinic plans lay spread across Casimir's desk, covered in Ivy's precise medical notations. Next to them sat preliminary designs for similar facilities in other cities, each one a step toward redemption, each one proof that power could protect instead of destroy. His empire still stood, but its foundations had shifted. The ledger's secrets remained sealed in the chapel, insurance against those who might try to revive old cruelties. But its purpose now was prevention rather than destruction. Casimir's arms tightened around her as another bell tolled. In the distance, dawn was just beginning to lighten the sky. They'd fought their way here through blood and betrayal, chosen each other despite every reason not to. Their love hadn't erased who they were, it had completed them. The ring caught starlight as Ivy reached up to touch his face. They'd rewritten the rules of his world without breaking its strength. Power tempered by mercy, protection without imprisonment, love that understood darkness but chose light. Below in the courtyard, the night shift changed guards, their movements precise but relaxed. The palazzo breathed around them, no longer a fortress but a home. Even the chapel felt different, its secrets now guarding hope instead of vengeance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Clinic inspections, security protocols, the constant work of maintaining peace. But tonight belonged to them, the weapon who'd learned tenderness, the healer who'd chosen strength, and the love they'd forged between darkness and light.